Welcome to the American Regularis Podcast. This is episode number 45, and I am your host, J.D. Walter. Real quick, before we get into everything today, which is going to be great, give me a like and subscribe on whatever you're listening or watching on. Follow me on Twitter also at reg_American1. And if you want to email me at American Regularis Podcast at gmail.com. Now, when I say to message me, to email me, let's not do it about the Chiefs game, all right? I am a Chiefs fan, and I know that makes me hateable to a lot of the people out here listening, but I'm a loudmouth libertarian, so I'm used to people not liking my opinions. Anyhow, I will tip my hat to the Eagles. They're great. Saquon Barkley is actually fairly quiet, and he's the guy that scares me the most. But the Eagles did a great job. So for all you Eagle fans, I hope you have a really fun weekend of looting and pillaging your city, and I hope your all your street fires keep you nice and warm as this cold weather moves in. So congratulations to you guys, and we'll try to be back next year. All right, now we get to talk about better stuff, mostly. Today we are going to cover a few things, all Trump-related, right? Trump's 4 weeks into his presidency and just still going strong, making waves. And last time, the podcast was talking about his first victories, right? His first major victories, and they were pretty significant. And for the most part, we keep seeing a trend. But I also stated on the last one that when Trump messes up, I would be here to complain and to point it out to you guys. And we do definitely have a little of that today. So for all the good I'm about to say, we are going to throw on a little caveat that at the end, we do have our gripes on what Trump's doing currently in office. However, 2025, not feeling particularly good about how the football season ended. I mean, it's hard to cry about second place for my Chiefs, but let's be optimistic. Let's be half glass full kind of people here, no matter how counterintuitive that is to us fine libertarians. And we do have a problem with that. To start out, I didn't vote for Trump. I said I was conflicted about it. I said I was thinking about it. And honestly, if he would have put Ron Paul in an official position, or maybe even Thomas Massie, I think I could have pulled the trigger. Instead, I wrote in Ron Paul. But, I was definitely rooting for Trump. With what I have seen from Donald Trump so far, I think all the libertarians that voted for him have been overwhelmingly, for the most part, affirmed in their decision. Except for foreign policy, which we will get into towards the end here. But coming out of the gates, we have seen a lot of substantial and significant moves by Donald Trump to attack the deep state. And obviously, this will get no credit from the media. They still can't admit there's a deep state yet, which is going to be harder and harder to do as Trump's pit bull, Elon Musk, continues to just get off his chain and lock on to government waste, fraud, and corruption like it's some, neighborhood kid that was just walking by the house. I don't really like pit bulls. Okay, my first compliment to what's continuing to go on is the D.O.G.E, right? Elon Musk and his crew are continually exposing large-scale, blatant, incompetent, or corrupt, sometimes both, fraudulent, almost always, waste, fraud, and abuse. And it is gorgeous. I'm telling you, I have wanted this. We see this all the time at Festivus. Rand Paul during Christmas, he does a Festivus thing, and he shows all this dumb spending that we do. Look what we're giving millions to for research, for, how cocaine makes rats view disco music differently or something. And we see this stuff all the time. Elon Musk is tasked to do this, and he's came at it a different way. I thought the Department of Government Efficiency would be more of like a maybe I wrongfully assumed this. I didn't know how it would work. but I figured it'd be a lot of guys coming in and reviewing papers and stuff. And instead, what Musk has done is he said, I'm getting the best AI guys in here, and we're going to find these programs that can sniff this stuff out better than humans. And look, I want to be skeptical of AI on different things. This might be the most beautiful use of AI I've seen to date. Now, if we can start to make AI, help fight pediatric cancers and things like that, then it can that can go to the top. That can take first place. It can sit on the top of the podium. Right now, I cannot think of a better use for AI than just quickly and, as the name would suggest, efficiently, just bringing to light all the corruption, all the fraud, all the, honestly, criminality, and in some cases incompetence. But when you see it at this scale, what good does it do them? It keeps them out of jail if they can try to make it all incompetence, but it certainly justifies the termination of these programs and bureaus or departments or whatever it is that DOGE is looking at. It's beautiful. It's the best thing I can think of for artificial intelligence. And Elon Musk is doing a great job at it. Now, as you listen to the corporate media, you're not going to see a whole lot of arguments about why these things should not be considered waste, fraud, and abuse. Instead, you hear, well, Elon Musk shouldn't be heading it because they don't want him to because he's doing such a bang-up job. He shouldn't be heading it because he's had billions of dollars worth of government contracts. Or, so there's a conflict of interest there, which is kind of crazy because it's certainly less of a conflict of interest than every time the government investigates itself. We should certainly at least be able to recognize that. Of course, they don't. They just complain that it's, uncouth or, hey, this seems corrupt, which is kind of a funny card to play when he is exposing amounts of corruption that none of them fathom to believe. And even if you are, like this old guy from the left, this old traditional liberal that wants big government and wants big Keynesian economic spending to stimulate stuff or to help the impoverished or those who, whatever. You want your equity and all that. Let's say that's what you want. Any of those people should still be excited about what Elon Musk is doing because it's saying, look at all this money that we're misallocating, whether it's through criminal, fraudulent means or stupidity. Look at all this money he's clearing up. They could say, okay, now what do we do? Now, they won't argue that we try to cut the debt and the deficit. They're not going to argue that. They're going to say, let's reallocate this to all these social programs. You don't even hear that argument from the corporate media. You just hear the way he's looking at this is very scary. It's very scary. And it's because I doubt most of the people reporting on this and with their face in front of the camera are really directly linked. But the people that pay them, the people that are paying the commercials and the ad spots, they're definitely there. And so they've got their marching orders to say, this is corrupt, right? It's like a thief thinks everybody steals. They're like, oh, we're getting caught being corrupt. You need to go out and say it's actually Elon Musk being corrupt by exposing the corruption. That's mostly it. Or with, we're going to talk about this in a moment, we're also going to hear that in the way that Trump has kind of established his means to root out this corruption. So the other day, I think it was yesterday, Elon Musk and Donald Trump appear together, and as well with Elon Musk's son, and they start telling you about what they're finding. We've known about the USAID stuff, and he's talking about the Treasury, and he's talking about these payments that are just crazy. He says, it takes over a year to get on the do not pay list, and then once you're on it, we ignore you. And when he talks about who's on the do not pay list, he's talking about people that are dead, who are still getting paid, terrorists, who still get paid, fraudsters, known fraudsters, who still get paid. And it still happens. He's saying, hey, we've got example after example of these short contracts, let's say 3 or 4 months of a contract by the U.S. government. And the payments continue every month for 20 years after it was a 4-month contract. Okay, so if I got, I'm I'm not going to force myself to do math here, but let's say in my 4 months, I get $1 million, right? And if you take that, so I should have $1 million by the government, and then they should stop paying me because I'm not going to work after those 4 months. But I do work after those 4 months, or excuse me, I quit working after the 4 months, but I keep getting paid. So my 4-month, $1 million contract is now $3 million that first year. And then it goes on for 20 years. All right, what's 20 times 3? Like they're making $60 million off a $1 million contract. And they only put in the work for 4 months. If they even did the work in the first place. All right, this is called being robbed blind. And the person being robbed blind is the U.S. taxpayer. Now, there's more ways that we're, obviously, any libertarian with their salt knows that we're being robbed in a lot more ways than just waste, fraud, and abuse. We can always talk about central bank, right, inflation, quantitative easing, all of that. So this just shows you how compounded it is, how much wealth is being stripped from the American people. And it's eye-opening. And none of the questions, very few of the questions that were directed at Trump and Musk, they were mostly about how is this ethical? How do you ensure that you're not going to screw up? One time you said it was like all those condoms. I think I might have mentioned this in the podcast. There's like a thing like $65 million worth of condoms going to Gaza. They're like, it wasn't Gaza. It was Mozambique. And it was like to blow the, like, oh, we've got you now. We've got you now. It was to Mozambique. Isn't that great? We got you. So your whole thing's defunct. And it was like, okay, so $65 million worth of condoms to Mozambique. That's all of a sudden, it's like, oh, well, it's super justified then. Their questions were so myopic and biased and deliberately shallow that you just realize that the entire establishment is against what I got to think is maybe one of the most popular things I've ever seen a president do, which is saying we are going to look at all the corruption of the government and we're going to try to figure out a way to slow down inflation, to slow down waste and abuse, and to try to help the economy from making this tick, this parasite known as the government, suck less blood from the American taxpayer. That's what this is. And, you know, I became a libertarian. I was a libertarian before I knew Ron Paul, but it was pretty close. And when I became a rabid libertarian is when I found out about Ron Paul and started reading about him. And before that, it was just like, I don't like government. I don't know why people can't just get along on their own. I was kind of just like, I was very uneducated and uninformed on it. And then I found out about Ron Paul and I got in. That was the most exciting time politically for me, was seeing Ron Paul on the debate stage. This is the most exciting time I've ever had for seeing the government do something that I'm genuinely excited about, which is, you know, Jordan Peterson would say this is step one. This is cleaning your own damn room, right? On his 12 simple rules for life, we could probably apply that to the government. We're starting to clean our room. Wonderful. We haven't seen this before. Every once in a while, I was like, okay, we'll search high and low. And it's like, oh, Obama kind of made it to where states had to compete for funds based on testing. And so they used less money but got better results than just giving flat. And it's like, okay, that's a reach. And that's like one of the things I remember that Obama did that was good. It's like this minor little footnote. It's whatever. This is just amazing. I hope they keep doing it. And when you look at what success and popularity, Trump's polling numbers are already higher than they ever had been. They're at like 55% approval rating right now. And I know that isn't great, but in today's, we have such a schism in our political beliefs. There's just such dividedness. 55 is pretty good. And if this thing is allowed to continue and we see what the economy can do through deficit reduction and less government spending and smaller scaled government, the thing that excites me the most is now the path to victory in later elections and administrations. Maybe it won't be to kiss the ring of the corporate media, to kowtow to lobbyists and moneyed interests and foreign investors and whoever knows, all, on all the skeezy pressures that the deep state brings upon you. Maybe they go, no, the pathway to victory now is answering this public cry for government accountability. And now, if that becomes it, and both parties have to at least respect that, well, that is revolutionary in a peaceful way. It would be amazing. Now, don't count out the deep state. Don't count out the corporate media. Their long, twisted, gnarly roots are sunk well within the soil of our nation. It will not be easy to uproot it. But at least right now, we've got a little bitty axe, a little bitty hatchet, with a 19-year-old kid named Big Balls swinging it or whatever. And we're seeing some success. And as a libertarian who, well, the reason I made this podcast was to just cry into my beer and tell you everything the government does is wrong. It's been hard to be positive on these, and you'll hear more of that from me. But as a libertarian, I never thought I would see the day where we're making such strides and exposing waste, fraud, and abuse. And it's got me wanting to spin around in a field in the Alps like I'm Julie Andrews in The Sound of Music and just start singing around like a little princess and, have the kids circle around. We just all break out into song and dance. That's how I feel right now as a libertarian. Can't ever say my government's made me feel that way before. So that's the good news. Now, obviously, I said the media's attacking it. And how they're attacking it, you can instantly tell they are getting desperate, because what the media says about this is we're in a constitutional crisis. Hey, that's our line, okay? You can't use our words. That's a libertarian line, okay? Because we actually care about the Constitution, right? Now, you can argue, and I often, align myself more of like a Lysander Spooner frame of mind. I'm not always like, I'm a constitutionalist if it works, but I don't find it as like something that has to be done. I think it's something that's been largely ineffective. But I still love what the Constitution says. My problem is with its utility. It doesn't usually function the way we want. And that's what they're saying. They're like, oh, our sacred Constitution. When the corporate media and big government is saying we're not adhering to the Constitution and they're stealing libertarian lines, they're running out of ideas. And when they say this, it's because a lot of this, like the Department of Government Efficiency, is made via executive order, which I'm not a fan of. I'm not a fan of executive orders, right? They argue it for some of the same reasons I do. It's like the executive branch's power has went way out of control. It's spiraled out of control. The checks and balances are all askew. It's not constitutional. They're right on that. But they've never cried about it before. All right. Was the media crying about it with the WPA and Japanese internment camps under Franklin Delano Roosevelt? No. Or under USAID with John F. Kennedy? No. Under mask and vaccine mandates under Joe Biden? No. They've never cried anything but crocodile tears, whatever. They've been fine with executive orders this entire time. And all of a sudden, this thing that I agree is it is unconstitutional, and it's generally very detrimental. But now all of a sudden we're seeing some executive orders being used in a way that is going to limit the scope and scale of maybe the size of government, but as well as its just ability to defraud the American taxpayer. And all of a sudden they're like, we have to adhere to the Constitution. Well, I'll be damned. When they figured out a way to hurt the oligarchs with executive orders, now aren't they a pain? And guess what? Like I said, I like the Constitution for what it could potentially do for liberty. But if it's not constitutional, if it's not strictly constitutional, okay, but we're advancing liberty and we're finding criminal activity by the government and we're trying to save the taxpayer money, I don't care. I don't care if it's not constitutional. that my goal is not a strict adherence to the rules of the Constitution. Now, if we do strictly adhere to the rules of the Constitution, we would have a better government, for sure, and that's the beauty of the Constitution. But you guys don't get to use it for 80 years, or let's just even go back, whatever, the founding of the Federal Reserve. You don't get to abuse executive orders and ignore the Constitution for the last 110 years and then cry after 3 weeks of it, going after all these moneyed interests and oligarchs and the deep state. No pity for you. Go pound sand. Absolutely great. Government spends $4 billion a day, and they act like we're stealing bread out of their mouth because they're getting audited. Okay. Now, not only this, some of the reason they say this is a constitutional crisis is because a federal judge has said, hey, some of these things aren't constitutional. You got to stop. And they're like, well, he doesn't stop. That's not a check and balance that he's adhering to from the government. So, it's a constitutional crisis. He's a tyrant, which is, not the first time he's been called a tyrant. But we don't have to go back that far. We can go back to Joe Biden talking about when the Supreme Court, not some federal circuit court judge or whatever, and I have no clue how the courts are ranked and appellates and all that, I don't know. But this is Joe Biden. This is a little mashup of him talking about student loan forgiveness, and when the Supreme Court labeled it to be unconstitutional. This would be, in a fair and balanced news media, something that they might refer to as a constitutional crisis. You tell me if you remember them ever saying anything of the sort, or if you remember them singing Biden's praises on this.
The Supreme Court blocked me from relieving student debt, but they didn't stop me.
The Supreme Court blocked it. They blocked it. But that didn't stop me.
The Supreme Court of the United States blocked me, but they didn't stop me.
They blocked me, but they didn't stop me, which meant he kept doing whatever it is he wanted to keep doing. Like I said, yeah, constitutionally, he shouldn't do it. Constitutionally, Trump shouldn't do it. But I'm for the one that is advancing the freedom of the American citizen and inhibiting the size of the government as long as its capability to defraud and criminally waste money. So, yeah, pound sand. I said it once. I'm going to say it again. Great. Now, I have sang praises for Trump for a pretty good amount of time here. Now I've got to complain. And that's foreign policy. For all the good, I'm talking about this. Trump's recently said that he wants the U.S. to occupy the Gaza Strip. And that he wants to deport 2 million Palestinians. And this is not deporting immigrants. This is deporting, for all intents and purposes. Am I wrong? Is it not an indigenous group? And I really... I'm not a DEI guy. I'm not saying indigenous because I think they should be treated. But it's like, no, this is their land for forever and ever. He wants to deport 2 million of them to Egypt and Jordan. Egypt and Jordan don't want them. And he wants to take it over and turn it into like the French Riviera of the Middle East or whatever. For all the good that Trump's done. And by the way, most of what Trump has done good so far is trying to get guys like Elon Musk involved, or Vivek, or Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. We're excited to get them confirmed because we will see improvements in the government where he surrounds himself with the good people, right? He hasn't done that with foreign aid. Now, he took away, I'll brag on him again, he took away Joe Biden's recently, Anthony Blinken's security clearance. He took away John Bolton's security clearance, hopefully more. He needs to take all that security clearances away, so you would think he would be doing better. But this is just the same old song and dance of U.S. imperialism. And, the best case scenario is less Gazans die, but if we know anything, do we think Hamas is going to just get up and leave because Trump said he wants to turn their homeland into the French Riviera? No. Right? with troops there, maybe there won't be much carpet bombing. Maybe civilian casualties can come down a little. I just don't think so. Maybe they start coming more from the Hamas side than the Israeli side. I don't know if you count that as a win. I just don't like seeing people die. And this will be a huge waste of money. So all this money that Trump wants to save by rooting out this corruption and stuff, we're gonna blow it on an expensive, costly occupation of Gaza, which will inevitably not produce the results we want because U.S. imperialism never works this way. Nothing the neocons have done has had the outcomes that they've said it would. So we're going to waste money and lives for fruitless endeavors, right? We're going to be pissing into the wind with dire consequences. And so, yes, I am so excited in these future podcasts to just continue to see progress that Elon Musk does. And like I said, Elon Musk replied to Elon McCollum's tweet. Liam McCollum's a great libertarian podcaster about putting Ron Paul in charge of an audit of the Federal Reserve. Elon Musk, the guy on D.O.G.E. that's doing all this great stuff, that's getting Trump these accolades, he says that's a great idea. That's amazing. That's why I want to dance in the Alps, right? All of that. Amazing. And it's because who he's surrounding himself with. He's given himself Elon Musk or maybe Tulsi Gabbard or RFK Jr. This is where the good stuff comes from. But when he listens to these idiots that run the American war machine, he will have his failures there. And I will be the first person to say when it's a terrible idea. And this is one of them. It's terrible in terms of economics. It's terrible in terms of morality. It's terrible in terms of what results will happen for cost of life. For the Palestinians, certainly. Probably for American soldiers. More American soldiers will die in Gaza than they would if they're sitting in Fort Bragg, right? And likely Israel. I don't know. So, mostly good, but man, what a disaster Trump is doing with this idea. And maybe it's one of his big bluffs so he can get like some big bargaining chip in negotiations, right? Trump doesn't do 4D chess, but he does set himself up a little bit, I think, in these negotiations. Maybe that's it. I certainly hope so. But how far down do you have to go before it becomes a reasonable idea? I don't know. A long darn ways. Now, I mentioned Fort Bragg as an example for a reason. This is my little fun takeaway. We had the good praises. We had the bad critiques on Trump, or good critiques of bad decisions of Trump. And I've had people from the left ask me what I thought about Trump renaming the Gulf of Mexico into the Gulf of America and renaming, I think he's going to rename Mount McKinley, where it's formerly been named Denali. And it's like, I just don't care. That's rearranging, rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It's inconsequential. We're $36.5 trillion in debt. We're strung out overseas. We have these economic policies that have caused so much inflation, and it's just, who cares what we call it? And we could call it, I'm an old man. Like, we could call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, and I could live, let's say I live 100 more years, which I won't. But Social Security might think I do. But I would still be calling it the Gulf of Mexico because that's what I learned of it as a kid. And this tiger don't change his stripes that easily, right? It's dumb. But I got to tell you, Trump is starting to rename some of the military bases during all this woke stuff the past decade. A lot of the bases had to go under name changes because they were named after guys who were on the Confederate side. This is obviously a huge no, and, it's evil, so they got to change it. Fort Bragg can't be named Fort Bragg anymore. It's now got to be named Fort Liberty. And I know people in the military are like, this is a pain in the butt. Now we have to change all this stuff. Now whenever someone says Fort Liberty, we got to go through and remember which one Fort Liberty is now, because they didn't just change the name of one. They changed, I think Fort Hood was changed, and Fort Bragg was changed, and I don't know if Fort Jackson was changed, or whatever. They changed all these names. Now we have to sit there and play this what the hell do we call it now game. Well, I have a memorandum here for Acting Secretary of the Army. I think this is Pete Hegseth that actually did this. Pursuant to the authority of the Secretary of Defense, Title IX, United States Code, direct the Army to change the name of Fort Liberty, North Carolina to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. All right. Now, I believe the original Fort Bragg was named after a general named Braxton Bragg, who was a Confederate. And so it had to be removed because of DEI and wokeness and whatever, right? He was on the wrong team. Got to get rid of Braxton Bragg. So then they name it Fort Liberty and everyone's confused. Hegseth does something which is kind of this little political go around. It is very political, but I do find this funny. Now it is renamed Fort Bragg again. Of course, they don't want to have to play this game with the woke crowd about it being called Fort Bragg. So it's now named Fort Bragg after not Braxton Bragg, but a private from World War II. Private First Class Roland L. Bragg, a World War II hero who earned the Silver Star and Purple Heart for his exceptional courage during the Battle of the Bulge. So, when he's a private, I mean, he Silver Star and a Purple Heart. Like, that guy's a warrior. That guy's a soldier. Usually privates don't get giant army bases named after them. This is obviously a workaround, but it's pretty funny. And I think the people that I've heard about it from that are in the military, I think they're like, hey, yes, nice. Now when I talk about Fort Bragg, I can just talk about Fort Bragg and I don't have to do this flip a card over memorization game on what it's called now. So I'd be interested to see if they don't find a new, if he doesn't keep doing this, find a different hood, find a different, whatever other base has been renamed. I find some humor in that. I do find it humorous and kind of this Weasley political game. You know, I'll be critical of Hegseth as long as they keep doing these ideas in Gaza and everything. But that part did just strike me as very funny, as a little tongue-in-cheek maneuver to upset the woke left. All right. Had fun this episode. It's good to be happy for the most part. Check me out, like and subscribe, tell all your friends, and we'll catch you later.